Ladies and gentlemen, in this RedGamingTech.com video we're going to be discussing the slew of information that Microsoft have released about the Xbox One. Sure, we did know some of this stuff in passing, such as, for example, the improved sensitivity of Kinect. Now we have a lot more information on it, the ability to record parts of your game footage, and a lot more besides. All of this was revealed at the San Diego Comic-Con over the last few days. And so, along with it and various other things, such as, for example, Avengers 2 news, we can really get excited. So without further ado, let's jump in. So I'm sure many of you are probably aware of an event known as Evolution, which of course is a fighting game tournament. And a lot of games are demoed there, as well as, say, for example, the new news on the update for Street Fighter. It also turns out that there was a playable build of Killer Instinct. Anyway, Ken Lobb, who is a creative director at Microsoft, has had Killer Instinct to be one of his pet passions for quite a long time, and has wanted to revive the franchise and bring it to a console for a while. So what he did is he actually used the recording features of the Xbox One to record matches from EVO, including himself, where we took on a couple of fans, and used that to actually record to show us just what the potential is for this feature. So if you simply say out loud Xbox record, what it goes ahead and does is it saves about the last 30 seconds of gameplay for uploading and then sharing to the cloud. Now, the Xbox itself will store pretty much anything for the last 5 minutes or so into the system's memory. And so obviously if you're playing and something really weird happens, you could just say Xbox record, and so you don't have to preempt something weird's going to happen, which is really cool for, say, game-breaking glitches. It does allow, for example, you to say, okay, here's this glitch I found, and it allows the developers in theory to be able to find these glitches a lot faster, and more to the point as well, it allows for you to show off some really weird stunts or whatever that you've managed to pull off that's like 1 in a million. You don't have to preempt recording this stuff. Now, we also have a lot more details regarding the controller itself. Now, the controllers, I'm pretty sure anyone knows that everyone has different ways to grip the controller, and preferences such as, do you want inversion on analog sticks, as well as a few other bits and pieces besides. So one of the benefits of the next generation Xbox is it will be able to tell if you or your buddy is holding the same controller. So in short, it no longer will just be a piece of plastic that you're holding, but it will have kind of like a life to it. It will know, okay, you know, Tom is holding me, and then let's say, you know, you pass it to your friend and it's a single player game. Oh, okay, Bill's holding me now, and I know that Bill prefers a little bit more a change in customization for his controller. He prefers it to be inverted and a little bit more sensitive. Now, to be fair, it's actually more honest to not say the controller itself is doing this, but rather the camera. So a lot of this stuff does go back, of course, to the Kinect camera, as it reads on just what you are doing, and a lot of this stuff that we're going to talk about in a moment as well is going to be very cool for upcoming horror games. The creative director of Turns 10, who have, of course, put together Forza, his name is Dan Greenwald, and he's been talking a lot more about the haptic functions as well as the rumble motors in the controller. The individual rumble in the controllers are there to provide feedback on, for example, tyre performance in Forza. And so in theory, a player will be able to know much better on how, say, the grip is of their tyres, and be able to get a much better and much more realistic understanding of when to brake. Now, it's also worth noting, as a slight aside from the controller stuff, just for a moment, that the video itself of, I believe it's the Prague course, was running at 1080p at 60 frames per second, which most people agree now is the goal for next generation graphics. Now, Microsoft's SmartGlass has already been somewhat integrated into Rise. However, the producer, Justin Roby, has been very happy to display yet more functionality on this. And one of the benefits of it is it allows you to keep track of what or should I say whom of your players are doing what in various multiplayer games. So this allows you to better be able to track players and say, okay, well, she is in this one, he's in this one, and therefore better organize something. So in theory, for example, if you're playing, for example, Rise, you could then invite your players, or sorry, a bunch of your friends to say, oh, let's say Dead Rising, and then you will be notified within the game you're playing. So for example, in this case, Rise, when they've all accepted their invitations or declined their invitations or whatever's happening, and therefore you can better make a judgment. Now, I've been rather vocal against Kinect in the past, and one of the primary reasons for this, I'll be totally honest, is that I've not really liked a lot of the stuff it's done. I've found that it caters extremely well to casual games and so on, but it hasn't really had what I'd call the fidelity or the level of technology to really help or improve games which, well, I'll just be blunt, have a controller. And so this is not really a unique criticism on my own part. I'm sure many people feel the same way. And of course, Kinect has also had various privacy concerns as well that I'm not really going to discuss in the video because I've already discussed those quite heavily. But primarily, Kinect hasn't really done it for me. I've never really felt to myself, well, this game would certainly benefit from Kinect. And to be honest, I'm still not really 100% convinced on the motion controls, but there are certain functionalities of Kinect and the cameras themselves that could be very cool for certain other applications. One of those is undoubtedly going to be action games or horror games. Now, one of the benefits of this is that it will better allow you as a player to become immersed in the game because the game knows how you are reacting to the game rather than just, okay, well, I'm reacting because he is moving to the right and shooting. That doesn't really give the game that much to work with because the game can't really read from your inputs. For example, did he just screw up? Did his thumb just slip off the analog stick? Or, is he actually nervous in this situation? And let's talk about horror games for a moment. Let's say the new Silent Hill. Did his thumb slip off the stick? Or is he actually genuinely nervous? Did he just screw up the button inputs? Maybe he's a bad gamer. I'm not, no offense. Or maybe he's a really good gamer and, it's just not phasing him at all. Maybe I need to ramp up the enemies. And the game itself can't make educated decisions based upon this because it has nothing to work with. It's only going by your controls, and your controls don't really mean anything because if you're a bad gamer, well, you're going to screw up. If you're hot and sweaty, you might screw up, and everyone occasionally presses the wrong button. It's just, human nature. And so the game does need something a little bit more. So Nick Burton, and he is the lead of new technology at Rare, was the one who introduced the topic of Kinect. And he himself mentioned that the accuracy and fidelity, as I quote, has not been quite there from the previous generation. So in other words, the original Kinect, rather than say Kinect 2.0, which of course is featured on the Xbox One. It could track about 20 points in the body, whereas the Xbox One can do about 10 times the resolution of the previous version. More to the point, and very impressively may I add, it can actually read the folds in your face and even discriminate and figure out which of your fingers are in which position at 3 meters, which is pretty damn impressive. One of the other benefits of this is that for more casual gamers, for people who just want to play, say, a game of bowling or rock climbing or whatever the hell, it will actually allow you to be a much better, much more accurate placements. It also showed off other bits and pieces as well, such as, for example, being able to produce masks of your face and put them onto in-game models. To be honest, I'm not really that fussed about that, and I don't really think that's super impressive. We've had technology like that before. It's not been amazing or whatever, but it's just something that doesn't really appeal to me personally. But there you have it. I am going to be very interested to see how horror games are going to use this information, because in theory at least, because obviously we know that The Kinect 2 now can read your emotions, can read your heart rate, can even read how your fingers are and everything else. It will definitely be able to make a much more immersive player experiences, which is good. Um, I think it could be quite cool in itself. I think it's going to be one of those situations where there are going to be concerns with this primarily, and this has been something I've talked about on the PlayStation 4 with some of its specific features. I'm going to be very curious to see how studios deal with this when it's a multi-platform release, because obviously the Xbox has certain features that the PlayStation doesn't, and vice versa as well. This has been another issue I have with cloud gaming, aside from the latency issue, um, which is obviously a huge deal. But several studios have already pointed out that, look, we're not really sure if we're going to be able to really start pushing this stuff because of multi-platform releases. So it's going to be I'm going to be very curious just how they're going to deal with this. So let's just for a moment talk about performance, and by which of course we're talking about the CPU and GPU performance. We don't really have anything specific here, but what we can talk about is Josh Bridge. Now he was discussing and showing off a highlight reel from Dead Rising 3. Now we do know that it's not just going to offer, say, more zombies. We're going to actually have a huge world here. It's reportedly to be about twice as big as the previous games, or to put it in another perspective, imagine bolting to get those Dead Rising 1 and 2 together, and that's pretty much what you're going to be dealing with. There's also going to be no loading times, which is pretty cool, and I really like that indeed. Now, one of the things that Josh actually showed via a slideshow was how much more detailed this is, specifically physics. And he showed physics-driven glass shards to biologically appropriate innards. So let's say, for example, you dismember a zombie, you cut it in half, well, or whatever you're doing to it, the poor little thing, then you'll be able to actually see realistic body parts that are, well, accurate to a human being. And so that obviously can have some impacts. Now I do have some concerns just how this is going to affect performance, but I'm imagining, if you think about it, pretty much everyone has pretty much the same innards. Let's face it, it's not like someone has, say, I don't know, 3 stomachs or something. So I imagine it can be pretty much copy and paste and a clone in that regard. I suppose we're going to have to see just how well this translates, and there's definitely going to be a lot of scope for improvements, because you've got to bear in mind as well that this stuff is still early. Developers are still getting used to the Xbox One, just as they are for the PlayStation 4 as well. It's not like Microsoft created it and suddenly know every single nuance to the hardware. They obviously have, say, better understanding than a third-party developer, for example, let's say Capcom, because obviously they help to put together the hardware. But still, it's still going to be a learning process, and obviously they are still improving it. We know from interviews of other games developers, as well as Microsoft themselves, in various comments, that they are still trying to improve the performance and hammer home the performance of the Xbox One. And this would go stuff like the SDKs and even the built-in drivers and operating systems, trying to get the footprint as small as possible and trying to improve the performance as much as possible to give developers as much power as possible for the games. So what are my thoughts overall? Well, I like some of the features. One of the best ones, actually, ironically for me, would be the controller. Maybe not ironically, but still. I really like the fact that the controller, or shall I say the camera and controller, will recognise who is holding what. True story. Half my friends really do prefer inversion, and I am someone that hates inversion. And so, as it turns out, if I'm playing a single player game with them, because we're just taking turns or whatever, it's extraordinarily annoying to have to keep going back to the bloody option screen, which sometimes can be buried like three menus deep, just to be able to change 1 or 2 settings, as well as maybe the sensitivity and say what the Y button does, just to then go all the way back out for 10 minutes and then have to do the whole thing again. Even matches such as fighting games, it's the same thing. If you guys are familiar with fighting games, you'll know that everyone, generally speaking, especially on the shoulders, has their own specific layout, or even on arcade sticks as well. Some people prefer, say, the top 4 buttons working on something like Soul Calibur. Other people prefer the more classic diamond shape on something like Soul Calibur, and so on and so forth. So obviously, stuff like this, just being able to recognize, okay, he or she prefers this button layout, and I'll just quickly load that up. It's going to be very cool. I do like that. On top of the graphics side of things, 1080p at 60 frames per second, I'm actually pretty impressed it is running that. I'm not really surprised, however. I think that it's going to be fairly obvious that they're going to be doing that now. I mean, let's face it, the games are still early. And by which I mean they've still not tapped into everything that the system can possibly do. That's just a natural. I'm not, criticizing the developers for this, but obviously as time goes on, frame rate or, resolution are gonna have to suffer. Because, well, it happens to happen for any console, because obviously it's fixed specifications, and I've already mentioned several times over of the benefits of the cloud, but also the limitations of the cloud, and I certainly don't think it's going to be the crutch that Microsoft are trying to sell us. I think it's going to allow certain features and much more persistent game worlds, but I don't think it's going to exactly allow, in I don't know, 6 years' time to have 3 times or 4 times better graphics at 1080p at 60 frames per second with absolutely no issues. On the other hand, I am somewhat iffy on SmartGlass integration. I think that most second screens and everything else on games and whatever, I'm still iffy about generally. I'm not saying that I don't like the idea of SmartGlass. I'm not saying that it's not going to be a cool feature. I just have issues with how well you're going to be able to do that if you're getting your butt handed to you in another game simultaneously. Like, for example, imagine trying to do that in a game like Call of Duty, which is obviously I just pulled that on my butt because obviously it's so fast paced. But imagine trying to set that up while trying to organize a match on, say, Halo. You're going to die a lot trying to multitask like that. So maybe that's just me, I don't know. I suppose we'll just have to see how it is in practice. Some of these features I think are going to be a lot better when you're actually trying them out rather than just watching them being demoed. Finally, I want to just quickly retouch on the highlight features. Now, I think that's going to be pretty cool for certain things. I think one of the benefits of it is definitely going to be the unplanned stuff, that I managed to get 6 kills within 20 seconds of one another, or I was racing on a racing game, obviously, and I managed to somehow come off the track or something, and you shouldn't be able to do that. Or I was playing the new Grand Theft Auto, whatever that's going to be called, and I managed to leap over a building and land in someone's living room or whatever. I think that's going to be cool, and that's stuff that you just could not possibly plan because you were just going with the flow of the game. I think it's going to be really cool for that. And also I think there's going to be some pretty cool bug fixes possible for that as well. Regardless, I don't think it's exactly a huge feature, and although I think people are going to use it a lot, I think it's going to be one of those features that isn't exactly groundbreaking either. So yeah, I mean, as I said, I am pretty impressed with some of the functionality of the Xbox One, but I think a lot of this we're going to really see just how much of a difference it makes over a number of years. Anyway, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I will see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.